In some ways, I touched on this next topic when we were talking about language, but it's a very, very common theme in culture, and that is syncretism. Syncretism means this is the amalgamation of different aspects of culture. For example, things like religion, language, ideas, and so on. So essentially, what it means, or basically what it means, is blending or mixing. So blending of languages, blending of ideas, which we know happens. Blending of religion also happens as well. What would cause this? Well, I'm a geographer, and because of that, I take a geographical perspective on things. Geographical proximity, in other words, where you are in relation to some other place, is going to be one of the things that's going to cause syncretism. So if two things, let's say their languages, are next to each other, they're going to blend together over time. Well, religion and ideas can do the same thing. Some religions are more flexible and more malleable than others. In other words, they're more open to syncretism than other religions. Let's take Japan, for example, where people tend to be either Shinto or Buddhist. But check this out. Shintoism, of course, is an ethnic religion. Buddhism is a universalizing religion. So they come from kind of different perspectives. At the same time, it's generally said that about 60% of people in Japan are Shintos and about 70% are Buddhist. Now, how could this be when this adds up to more than 100%? It's because people blend them together. And in Japan, there's no problem with this. They mix Shintoism and Buddhism, and they don't bat an eye about it. And in fact, African, Latin American, Asian Pacific Islander animism and traditional beliefs in all of those places commonly blend together with other religious forms. Now, in just about every case, these other religious forms were brought in, and they were either through missionaries, taught to people and pushed to people, or they were forced on them in many cases. And this is primarily Christianity and Islam. I'm not knocking either of those two religions. I'm just saying that we know that this is what happened over time. Let's take Santeria and Voodoo. Okay, these are two things you've probably heard of. Basically, Santeria and to some extent Voodoo is a mix of traditional African beliefs and Roman Catholicism. Other Christian beliefs as well, though, get mixed into this, but basically the primary component is Catholicism and then traditional African animistic beliefs. This is common throughout the Caribbean and parts of Latin America, where, of course, there is a substantial population of people who are descended from African slaves. And then, of course, Christianity was brought in as well. And then you had traditional indigenous religious beliefs on top of that. So all of these things have a tendency to mix together in the Caribbean and then parts of Latin America. This is Santeria in Cuba. If you look at the left-hand side, you can see a bunch of Catholic iconography. But of course, there's that mask right in the middle, which is not very Catholic. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that there is a goat head right in the middle of this little Santeria altar. And then there's blood splashed on the wall. But they mix these things together seamlessly. They don't really give a lot of consideration to the fact that some people would say these things cannot be mixed together. They don't really care. This is also Santeria in Cuba. Now, what that woman is holding on the left-hand side is sometimes called a voodoo doll. Now, you can imagine the negative aspect of that term and how it's been used against people who look like her by people who do not look like her to degrade her and her religious beliefs. But if I say voodoo doll, you have some idea of what I'm talking about, but it is really significantly more complicated than that. If you look around and you're in the Caribbean, it is not hard to find versions of Santeria and voodoo. You have to kind of have your eyes open, but if you do, you will be able to find it. In addition to that, in places like the northern part of South America, and then down into Brazil as well, It's very, very common. You just have to have your eyes open and you'll find it. And actually, you'll find that people are really cool. They have a great understanding of the world. They just have a slightly different view than most people in, for example, the United States would have. Also, on Rapa Nui, which is also known as Easter Island or Isla de Pascua, which is controlled by Chile. It was taken over as a colonial possession by Chile in the 1800s. So these are the famous moai on Rapa Nui. I mean, there's lots of these moai on Rapa Nui, but this is one of the most famous set of them. There are also petroglyphs on Rapa Nui with some very famous icons carved into the rock. Like, for example, the tortoise. I've talked about this before with you, and birds. Well, this is the main Catholic church in the main city on Rapa Nui. The city is called Hangaroa. It's not a very big city. But if you look at the left-hand side and then take a closer look at the front or the right-hand side of the front of the church, when you're walking into it, you can see that there's all kinds of things happening here. There's traditional Catholic iconography with the Christs and the angels, and at the same time, there's the Rapa Nui stuff that's on there. Because these things blend together, and the people there do not have a problem with it. Right when you walk into the church, there's a bird saint. It's kind of awesome when you see it, and you can see it has a tortoise shell right in the middle of it. It's using the traditional beliefs of people who are from Rapa Nui, and it's just incorporating them into Catholicism. And they have no problem with it. They do this seamlessly. Also, the Mary statue, which is Mary holding Jesus. You can see that it not only has kind of a bird look to it and a bird on top of Mary's head, but the Jesus has a very Polynesian kind of look to it, as does the Jesus on the cross, which also has the tortoise on the top of his head. It's kind of amazing. So is there a thing called religious purity? Well, throughout human history, the search for religious purity tends to lead to increasingly smaller numbers of people who are able to meet the test of religious purity, and then varying levels of militancy to either purge people or enforce the religious purity. Think of ISIS, and it doesn't just have to be ISIS. This could be applied all over the place in many different circumstances and many different religions throughout time. The Puritans, when they arrived in New England with John Winthrop as their leader, think about the name, Puritans. They were trying to purify Christianity and left Europe because it was too polluted for them with other versions of religious thought. John Winthrop, over time, went through an evolution of thought on this because he saw fewer and fewer people who were able to actually meet the militancy of Puritanism. And he realized that this was probably not the right direction to go, or there would be nobody left but him who was able to meet it. Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was a descendant of Puritans and one of the greatest writers in the 19th century in the United States, was kind of purging himself of his own history of Puritanism and the negative aspects of it. And if you read the two short stories, The Black Veil or Young Goodman Brown, he talks about this only in a literate sense. Or if you ever read The House of Seven Gables or The Scarlet Letter, they are all about this same thing, that there's really no way to construct religious purity. There's a constant blending that's happening, syncretism that's going on, and it evolves through time. And that is not a bad thing.